What's up, heroes? Welcome to another edition of Book Club. We are continuing our work on Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm going to go ahead and share out my screen here because we have a lot to go over. So this week we are on section 3 of the book. This is How to Win People to Your Way of Thinking. And for me, this is really the heart of the book. This is the good stuff right here. So I'm going to jump right in. There are actually 12 different points in this section. I'm only going to do about 8 of them because it's so chock full. This talk would go on for like half an hour. So jumping into it, point number 1, and this is probably the best one of the entire book. The only way to win an argument is to avoid it. And this is so difficult, but so true. So Carnegie says, why prove to a man that he's wrong? Is that going to make him like you? Why not let him save his face? He didn't ask for your opinion. He didn't want it. Why argue with him? And that's so true with so many of the arguments. In fact, Carnegie even gives an argument over a factual issue where someone says that a Shakespearean quote is in the Bible, and his friend, who I think is a pastor or something, actually says, no, that's that Shakespeare quote. Well, what actually is Shakespeare? No, that's in the Bible. Because the point is, why argue with the other guy? It just makes him defensive. So the point of this is whether you win or lose the argument, you're still going to lose because the other person's not going to be happy about losing the argument. It just makes them defensive. So try to avoid arguments, especially nowadays on social media. You'll never win them. Second one, never say you're wrong. That instantly puts the other person on the defensive. So as Carnegie says, nothing good is accomplished and a lot of damage can be done if you tell a person just straight out that they're wrong. You only succeed in stripping that person of self-dignity and making yourself an unwelcome part of any discussion. In other words, you're done. You're out of the discussion when you say that. So instead of doing that, you can do the opposite and point out cases where maybe you don't agree with them right now, but maybe you can figure out some cases where they might be right, different case or different circumstances, and focus on those. And then this key phrase that my wife actually still memorized from reading this book, and I love it, is, I may be wrong. I frequently am. Let's look at the facts. That is so disarming. Admit first, even if you know you're right, because the worst part, and Carnegie talks about this, is what if you actually were wrong, but you just stood your ground and said, no, you are wrong. And then you find out, no, actually I'm wrong. So another great tactic, and I love this one, is if you're wrong, admit it immediately and emphatically. As Carnegie says, any fool can try to defend his or her mistakes, but it raises one above the herd and gives one a feeling of nobility to admit one's mistakes. And then I love this one. Say about yourself all the derogatory things you know the other person is thinking or wants to say and intends to say, and say them before the other person has a chance to do it. And the chances are that 100 to 1, that person will be generous and forgiving and minimize your mistake. In fact, in the examples that Carnegie gives, you actually disarm the opponent and force them to then turn around and defend you. Next point, begin in a friendly way. Don't come into an argument guns blazing. You're just going to encourage defensiveness. Come in and establish some rapport first. Next, this is a classic sales technique. Get the other person saying yes, yes, immediately, because once a person says no, they're entrenched. Once they disagree, they feel like they have to defend that to save face. Remember, the Socratic method, which is one of the best methods for teaching of all time, is all about just getting the other person to agree with simple, basic statements. So ask questions the other person can agree with. Find the points in common. In most cases, you're going to find that you have 85, 90% in common, and you only disagree about some small things. So establish rapport by finding the areas that you have in common first, and then there's very little left to do. So the sales part is when you get a person used to saying yes to you over and over, this is just classic, they're much more likely to say yes to placing an order with you. And this works in debate as well. Another one, people love to hear their own voice. Let them do the majority of the talking. As Carnegie points out, he's seen many cases where people actually argue themselves out of something just by being allowed to talk something through. And then remember that mountain of anger that we talked about in our last lesson. People sometimes just need to get something out, and then they will be open to agreeing with you. Another great one, I love this tactic. Let the other person feel that the idea is theirs. Or as another author said it, it's the art of letting other people get your way. And Carnegie says the way to do this is to just make some suggestions and let the other person draw the natural conclusions. All you have to do is set things up. Most people are logical. Use phrases like, okay, so what you're suggesting, or where I see you going with this. And then once they come up with your idea, compliment them sincerely. Wow, that's a great idea. I think that'll really work. I'm so glad you brought that up. I can't wait to try that. It doesn't hurt to let someone else take credit for your idea because your idea is still the one that's going to prevail. Empathy, or at least sympathy. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Here's another good phrase to use. I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, or if I were in your shoes, if I were in your situation, I would undoubtedly feel the exact same way. There's a reason why the other person thinks and acts the way he does. So ferret out what that reason is, and you're going to have some really good ideas of why they're coming from that point of view. All right, so really thick, really good stuff. Now I want you to take some time to discuss which of these do you use? Which of them do you think are really good? Which of them have you never used, but now you're starting to think, that could really work for me. All right, heroes, it is great talking to you again. We will see you next week as we finish up the book. Until then, have a great life and go out and change someone's life.